Think about the last time you opened TikTok, Instagram Reels, or YouTube Shorts. Chances are you've seen an edit of Walter White standing in the dark, looking all powerful. Maybe you've seen Patrick Bateman adjusting his tie while dramatic music plays in the background. Or maybe you've also seen clips of Jordan Belfort giving speeches about success and ambition. And what's interesting is these characters were never meant to be role models. Walter White is a drug kingpin whose pursuit of power destroys his family. Patrick Bateman is a violent sociopath. Jordan Belfort built his fortune through fraud and manipulation. Despite all this, millions of people admired him. And today, I want to explore why this happens. Today, I'll be exploring how social media has turned villains into role models. Characters who were meant to warn us about greed, power, and toxic behavior are now being admired online. Using Stuart Hall's encoding and decoding theory, active audience theory, and ideas about masculinity, I'll examine why audiences are often drawn to these characters and what this says about the modern digital culture. Before we examine why audiences admire these characters, we first need to understand what they were originally designed to represent. Let's take Walter White from Breaking Bad as an example. The series follows a regular chemistry teacher who gradually becomes consumed by greed, pride, and power. The story is a fundamental warning about the consequences of unchecked ambition. In addition, Patrick Bateman from American Psycho was never intended to be inspirational. The character serves as a satire of consumerism, wealth obsession, and performative masculinity. His life appears to be successful on the surface, but underneath, it is empty, isolated, and deeply disturbed. And to be honest, the same can be said for Jordan Belfort in Wolf of Wall Street. While the film showcases wealth and luxury, it also highlights corruption, addiction, and the damage caused by Belfort's actions. In each of these examples, the creators intended audiences to recognize these dangers associated with these characters. However, something changes when these stories enter online spaces. Rather than focusing on the consequences, audiences often focus on the confidence. Rather than focusing on the warning, they focus on the image. And that's where the relationship between creators and audiences become important. And this idea can be explained through Stuart Hall's encoding and decoding theory. Hall argued that media producers encode particular meanings into their texts. However, audiences are not passive recipients of these meanings. Instead, they actively interpret and decode media based on their own experiences, beliefs, and social context. This means that creators do not have complete control on how their work is understood. For example, Breaking Bad's creator may have intended Walter White to be viewed as a cautionary example of moral decline. However, audiences may decode him differently. Some may see him as a villain, and some may see him as a determined individual who refuses to accept failure. Likewise, Patrick Bateman was encoded as a criticism of status-driven masculinity, yet many audiences decode him as a symbol of discipline, confidence, and success. Hall's theory is important because it shifts our attention away from the creators and towards the audiences themselves. And then the real question becomes, why are audiences choosing these interpretations? What is it about these characters that resonates so strongly with modern viewers? And to answer that, we need to examine how audiences engage with media in the digital age. Smith, Nelson, and Lawrence argue that modern audiences are active participants in media culture. Audiences simply don't consume media anymore. They create it, remix it, edit it, and share it. And most importantly, they assign new meanings to it. Social media platforms have dramatically expanded this process. For example, many people today encounter Walter White not through watching all 5 seasons of Breaking Bad, but through short edits on TikTok or Instagram. These edits often remove the broader narrative context. Instead of showing the destruction caused by Walter's action, they focus on his most powerful moments. Same thing happens with Patrick Bateman. Social media rarely highlights the satirical message of American Psycho. Instead, it focuses on luxury shoots, confidence, appearance, and status. As a result, audiences are often interacting with a simplified version of the character. The algorithm rewards content that is visually engaging and emotionally impactful. It removes complex. Nuance is removed. Context is removed. And what remains is an image, and that image can be more influential than the original story itself. And to fully understand why these characters remain appealing, we also need to consider masculinity. Cornell argues that societies often promote ideals associated with hemogamic masculinity, including power, dominance, competitiveness, success, and control. And these values appear repeatedly in the villains that audiences admire. Walter White gains authority. Jordan Belfort gains wealth. Patrick Bateman gains status. And although their actions are morally questionable, they embody characteristics that many societies continue to celebrate. This is particularly visible online. Many digital communities emphasize self-improvement, financial success, confidence, and personal dominance. Within these spaces, anti-heroes often become symbols of aspiration. What makes this interesting is that audiences frequently separate these characters from their actions. People are not admiring Walter White's criminal behavior. They are admiring his confidence. They are not celebrating Patrick Bateman's violence. They are celebrating his status and appearance. This suggests that audiences are simply not engaging with these characters as fictional figures. They are using them as tools for identity formation. These characters have become representations of people who want to be rather than what the stories were originally trying to say. At this point, the discussion becomes bigger than television shows or movies. The popularity of anti-heroes reveals something about contemporary culture itself. In modern society, success is often measured through visibility, influence, wealth, and status. Social media reinforces these values every day. The most visible people online are often those who appear powerful, confident, and successful. Because of this, audiences may become more attractive to displays of success rather than decisions of morality. This helps explain why cautionary tales sometimes fail to function as warnings. The warnings remain present, but the audiences focus on the reward. Instead of asking whether a character is ethical, many viewers ask whether they are successful. And once success becomes the primary focus, the original message begins to fade. Another concept that helps explain the popularity of villains is the audience spaces. Audience spaces are online environments where people gather to discuss, share, and interpret media. These spaces often include TikTok, Reddit, Instagram, YouTube comment sections, and even fan communities. Within these spaces, meanings are constantly negotiated between audience members. For example, someone might post a Walter White edit on TikTok highlighting his confidence and intelligence. Thousands of users then engage with the content through comments, reposts, and discussion. Over time, these interactions can reinforce a particular interpretation of the character. Rather than viewing Walter White as a warning about power and pride, the audience space may collectively construct him as a symbol of ambition and success. The same process can be seen with Patrick Bateman. Online communities often focus on his appearance, wealth, and discipline while ignoring the satirical message of American Psycho. This demonstrates that audience meanings are not formed individually, they are often shaped collectively through participation in digital communities. As audiences interact with one another, certain interpretations can become more popular and more visible than others. In this sense, audience spaces do not simply reflect media meanings, they actively produce and circulate them. This then links closely to Smith, Nelson, and Lawrence's concept of an active audience. Rather than passively consuming media, audiences use digital spaces to create, negotiate, and spread new interpretations. As a result, characters originally written as warnings then can be transformed into role models through collective audience activity. Also, the popularity of anti-heroes may also reflect broader cultural values. Many contemporary societies place significant importance on wealth, success, status, and influence. Characters such as Jordan Belfort and Walter White embody these ideals. Although their methods are unethical, they achieve forms of success that many people aspire towards. The admiration of anti-heroes therefore reveals not only how audiences interpret media, but which values society chooses to reward. Social media is not only a place where people consume content, it is also a place where people perform identity. Sharing a Patrick Bateman edit or posting a Walter White quote can communicate something about how individuals want to be perceived. In this sense, media consumption becomes a form of self-expression. The popularity of anti-heroes may therefore be linked to the way people use media symbols to construct or communicate identities online. Because unlike conventional heroes and villains, anti-heroes also occupy a moral gray area. This complexity often generates more discussion and engagement than straightforward moral narratives. And as a result, anti-heroes become particularly valuable within audience spaces where interpretation and debate are encouraged. Perhaps the most important question isn't why audiences admire villains. The more important question is why traits such as power, wealth, dominance, and status remain attractive even when they are presented alongside corruption, violence, and moral failure. To conclude, the popularity of villains like Walter White, Patrick Bateman, and Jordan Belfort shows that audiences don't always see characters as the way creators intended. Using Stoics' whole theory, we saw that audiences create their own meanings through media. Through social media platforms such as TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, these meanings are shared and reinforced in audience spaces. As a result, characters who were meant to be warnings are often seen as symbols of confidence, power, and success. What makes this topic interesting is that it tells us something about modern culture. The popularity of these anti-heroes isn't just about the characters themselves, it reflects the values that many people admire and share online. Ultimately, villains become role models because audiences focus on what these characters represent rather than what happens to them. In doing so, social media has changed the way many people understand and engage with media. My name is Tafosa Zengaya, and thank you for listening to me.